Assalamu alaikum. Human behavior, perception. In today's topic, we will talk about perception. That's the main title of our today's course. So, we have been discussing about perception in general in our last lectures, that how exactly perception gets to develop. Today, in our lecture, we have this perception as a whole, the topic which we will be discussing. So, the first thing which we would discuss in this topic of perception is attentional process. So we will keep our focus mainly to the organizations, that when we work in the organizations, how exactly things work out and how this course of human behavior applied in corporate sector. So attentional process. When we are there in the organizations, when we're working in different departments, when we are briefed about different tasks, different assignments which we have to do as a part of the team during our stay with the organization, then the thing which matters the most is that how attentive we are when we are being briefed about any job at hand. Until and unless the problem is not clearly understood, we will not be able to come up with the true solution for that. So therefore, there is this exact need, there's this die-hard need that we need to be very attentive. So this is the first topic of today's session, which is attentional process. So bookishly, the topic is defined as attentional process refers to the processes that determine what is attended to and therefore what is learned through observation. So, as it is very easy to understand from the line itself, from this small definition itself, that whenever we give attention to something, then we get to learn something. Whenever we do not pay attention to anything, we do not learn anything. Therefore, it is very important that if we want to learn something, then we need to be attentive. If there are three persons talking at a time in the room, then you will only hear a noise. You will not understand that what message is being talked about or what the three different people are actually talking about. But once you know that in that room, out of those three person, there is one person who is relevant to you, and you need to pay attention to that single person, and you have to avoid paying attention to the rest of the two. So now your brain is going to focus. Earlier, when you stepped inside the room, you did not know that who is the person you should be paying attention to. Therefore, your brain was not accepting any message, your brain was not receiving any message. Therefore, this was a normal process. This was a normal process of not paying attention because you did not have a task in your mind at that time. But once you know that in that single room where there are three people standing and talking, sitting and talking, and you need to pay attention to Mr. A, who is sitting inside the room and giving a brief about any certain project. So now when you enter inside the room, despite having three-person talking at a time, but now you will be able to listen to that single voice of Mr. A only. Because now exactly you know that you have to pay attention to that single voice and you have to pay attention to that single voice. Now, how exactly in this environment of noise, when there are a lot of people talking at a time, will you be able to understand the what message Mr. A is actually talking about? So if you only pay attention to the noise, then there is absolutely nothing you will be learning. So if you need to learn really something over here, then you would need to pay attention. And this exactly is something which is expected in today's topic, attentional process. So we said in the beginning that we are mainly talking about organization, that how exactly things work out in organization, but the same knowledge you can actually apply, and you can relate the same knowledge in the real life examples, even at your home. When there are a lot of people talking, you have your siblings, they're playing, they're making noises, they're having fun, they're screaming, they're yelling. But on the other side, there's I mean, you recognize that you have uh, a person standing in the room and who is trying to talk to you. So you realize that there is somebody inside the room, which probably is from the guests, maybe. So you're watching that person for the first time, and you realize that okay, you have a guest from your next neighbor, and he is trying to talk to you. So now, despite having these siblings, making noises, but once now you'll pay attention, you will be able to understand what that person is trying to have a talk of. So this is something which is we achieve when we pay attention to any important thing. Without attention, there is nothing achieved in the process of communication, particularly because whenever there is oral communication taking place, there is always going to be an exchange of messages. So an exchange can only be possible, and a response can only be possible. A feedback will only be possible if the first message is actually heard properly. And equally, not only the first message, the respondent has to not only listen to it, but has to pay, an appropriate response as well. So once that response has been delivered, so now Mr. A will respond back to the person who, in fact, he has been responded by. So therefore, attentional process in the organization, it is very important that whenever you're briefed about something in organizations, whenever there is, whenever you are giving interview or whenever you have a presentation to deliver or give, or you join a department and you are being told that that this is going to be a job description and these are the areas where you need to put focus on. So until and unless you will not pay attention to this brief, you will not be able to position yourself perfectly to prove yourself as a perfect resource for that particular vacancy you have been actually chosen for by the organizations. Therefore, if you really want to prove your mark, then you need to pay attention. So now the first process is actually attentional process, which is a process in which you try to understand, you try to bring logic, and you try to interpret exactly what the other person is actually trying to talk. So all this is actually completely done in the process of attention. So once you pay attention, you at a time your brain starts functioning actively. You would listen to the message. You will try to relate it to the existing memory which you have. You'll try to relate it to the various subjects of knowledge you already possess, so that you could exactly understand that what the speaker is trying to talk, or what message the speaker is actually trying to deliver. So once you have understood that without this process of attention there is anything can be achieved, there's nothing which can be achieved. So with this, the second important process of in organization which starts is a process of perception, the organizational process in perception. See, what does that mean? How exactly this process of perception being addressed in the organizations, or in the normal go, not in the organization, whenever you're paying attention to somebody and now you are trying to make an interpretation out of the message. So again, there is a need of organizing. You would need to organize the thoughts which are being shared by the speaker. So then only you will be able to understand what the person is actually trying to talk and what the person is actually trying to talk about. So here, the first thing which comes in the process of organizational process in perception is receiving. So technically, there are four important pillars of perception in the organization. So the first one is receiving, second one is selecting, third one is organizing, and fourth one is interpreting. So now that's actually interesting because these four pillars combinedly would enable you to exactly interpret what the speaker is actually trying to talk to you. So the first process is receiving. So once you convince yourself that okay, he or she is the person I need to pay attention to and I need to understand the person, so that I could exactly know what that person is actually talking, what that person is talking, so that exactly you could respond to that person. So only then you will start receiving the message from that particular person. So once this paying of attention process is decided in the mind, and then only you'll be able to start receiving the messages from the speaker. And now once there is a lot of being there is a lot of being talked about, there are many things which are being talked about, and you are there for the first time in the organization, you are banked with the existing knowledge you have. So now in the organization, obviously there is going to be um some new perspective which will be talked about, some new knowledge you would need to acquire to meet up with the requirement of that particular job you have been actually selected for. So now after having decided to receive message from any person, in the second phase, the second process is of selecting. So the selecting is a process in which once you get to know that the receiver is actually talking, and while he's talking, you realize that speaker is at a time trying to communicate a message, and he's not only communicating the message, but alongside with that, the speaker is adding on some extra information alongside with the actual message. So in such circumstances, what you will do is that you will try and try to cut off the extra information which is being shared, so that you could only get the relevant information, you could only receive the relevant information. You would realize that there's extra being talked about, so you will not pay attention to the extra things which are being talked about. You get to know that there are certain examples which are being given to make the audience understand the topic. So you will continue cutting away all the additional things which are there, which are being said, so that only relevant information pick from that message. So in the first go, you as a receiver, as an audience, you decided that you were going to pay attention to that speaker. So this way you will start the process of receiving, because now and only then you will be able to receive the message of the speaker. And the second step, you once you got to know that there is a lot being talked about, so you will start selecting the relevant messages only. In the process of selecting, what you do as an audience is that you cut down the extra information, and you just pay attention, you just pay heed to only relevant information, and so that you are not being carried away by the extra information, and you just remain focused on the pertinent information only. So now, after having this thing decided that there is only a relevant message which you will take from that speaker, this is the second step of organizational process in perception. First one was receiving, then selecting, and in the third phase, you will organize the messages which you have selected from the talk you are paying attention to. So here in this step, like we discussed, that out of a lot of messages which are being communicated, you will only pay attention to the relevant messages only. You will select the relevant messages only, and after having heard all the talk, now you will organize all the talk inside your mind to exactly create an idea of uh, a kind of response the speaker is actually expecting from you, or kind of understanding the speaker is wanting to achieve from the audience, because there is always a purpose of the speaker who is delivering a message, and there is always a perception, there is always an interpretation which the speaker wants the audience to make. And so you as a sincere audience would like to achieve that, would like to meet that particular standard which the speaker is trying to set, and is trying to communicate a certain type of message. So you will try to receive that message out. So in this second space, in this second step, what you would do is, in the third step rather, in the third step, After having selected the relevant message, you will organize the message in your mind so that you could uh, create an interpretation. For creating an interpretation from the message, what you will do is that you will receive the message, select the relevant talk only, then create a link between all those, and this way you will organize the talk inside your mind, and eventually you will be able to interpret the message of the speaker. So this way, uh, when all these four forces are actually combined, so after that you will be able to understand the message, and you will try to then respond. So here, because there are like different type of people sitting in the audience with different type of backgrounds, with different type of experiences, with different type of exposures, there are different type of experiences. There are certain people with more experience than certain people who would probably be only starting the job at that time. Therefore, everybody would interpret the message as per the experiences that person had in the life earlier, and there is an obvious element of the difference in the understanding level of the audience. There will be people who will be understanding the all parts of the message just in true spirit, the spirit in which the speaker was wanting the audience to understand the message, but there are going to be audiences who would only be able to understand the message in very small percentage, very bleak percentage, that is 15 to 20% only, because rest 80% of the message was requiring a little homework, which you as a first timer in the organization might not be aware of things. Therefore you would need to understand the background, the culture, the way things take place in the organization, so that you have that basic benchmark in your mind of of knowledge, from where onwards you would be able to interpret exactly the messages which are discussed in the organization during the organizational talk. So this way, we have just talked about the organizational process in perception, and we have talked about four key pillars, which is receiving, selecting, organizing, and interpreting. Now, after having attention process discussed, in which you, after going to the organization, you have been placed in a department. For example, you get to know that you have been placed in the marketing department. So now you would know that, you see, there are a lot of departments out there in the organization. There is going to be administration, there is going to be advertising, there is going to be finance, accounts, um, maybe uh, payroll, HR, and different departments. Likewise, in the banking sector there are like more departments like SME department, corporate banking department, and commercial banking department, consumer banking department, treasury department, likewise branch banking department, institutional banking department, corporate finance department. They are like in the banking fraternity. That actually depends upon organization to organization, and that also depends upon the kind of services the organization is actually trying to deliver. So that way, there are going to be specialized departments allocated and dedicated for the specified services which that organization will be actually delivering. So once you have been chosen for the marketing department, and there are a lot of people having a talk inside, so now you know that you need to pay attention to the marketing department guy, so that you see, then you'll be able to understand that because you need to cope up with the marketing team. So for you, the most important message is going to be a message from the marketing department. So there are a lot of people quoting things, and there are a lot of people they'll be attributing things to the marketing department, but for you, the main thing is the information which is coming from the horse's mouth. So you would rather be more, giving importance to the information which is being given to you or delivered to you directly from the marketing department, instead of somebody attributing anything to the marketing department, that there was something which was said from the marketing department team. So this way, you would be having in your mind that you need to pay attention to this department, where you will be only um, having the focus given to, and from there onward you'll be understanding and interpreting the messages. In the second step, you decided that, okay, from the lot of departments there in the organization. You will be receiving messages from the team of marketing. Then you will be, again, they're like, we discussed that there are going to be a lot of messages talked about. So you'll cut down the extra information. You'll select the information from the message, which is actually discussed during the organizational talk. And after having that got the message, which after having the message got selected, then you will organize the message based on the selected message inside your mind, and then you'll interpret the message. So here we said that since there are different people with different experience levels, so different people, based on their experiences in life, they would interpret the message in different manners. Because of this, there is always going to be a difference in understanding, and the same message which is delivered by a single speaker, but there are going to be different interpretations. There are going to be different messages taken away by different audiences based on their various perception levels. So here, the speaker should ensure that actual messages are, have been taken away by all the speakers, and that he can do by, or she can do by, taking the feedback. Okay. The third process is identification, and the third important topic which today we are going to discuss in this topic of perception is identification and recognition. So the identification and recognition, let's first go with the definition which is there in this on this slide right now. And it says identification is the act of identifying or providing to be the same, while recognition is the act of recognizing or the condition of being recognized. So here, identification and recognition are two almost similar terms. It may be confusing at times that you see identify and recognize that sound similar. So what could be the difference between these two? So the best example which can enable us to understand the difference between identification and recognition can be that, for example, you are standing uh, on a bus stop, and from the far distance you see, couple of shadows which are moving towards you. So initially, when you look at the shadows, you get confused that, okay, what that thing is actually, which is marching towards you. So in the initial step, you will try to identify the thing which is marching towards you. So you, after once, as the shadows are getting closer, as and after once the actual view of the creatures which are approaching you, you were able to saw them with your naked eye, that would be the time you will be able to identify that what that actual creature is, of whose shadow you were witnessing or making guesses of things earlier. So now as that thing approaches you, you would know that the two shadows which are approaching you are basically two humans. So now in this process of identification, you have identified that the thing which was approaching you was actually human. So this is the identification. So now you will try to understand. Now you will try to recognize that you see who these two persons are. Now you have assessed, once the thing was they were approaching you, initially the shadows you saw. So from the shadows you started guessing. Then you actually saw and realized that there are actually two human beings coming towards you. Now you're waiting for them to get more closer to you so that you can exactly recognize that who they are. You have identified them as the humans, and they're not animals. I mean, both are actually humans. There can be one human, and the second could have been animal walking along with that human, or maybe there could have been there could have been anything else. There could have been a motor car or something like that. So in this process, initially you will identify the two approaching things were actually humans. I mean, who were actually approaching you. Then in the second phase, from the process of identification, now the second process which is going to start is of recognition. In the second phase, you will try to recognize that who the two persons are who are actually trying to approach you. So as they will come close, you will you'll look at both of their faces and you'll realize that you see one out of the two is somebody to whom you know, and the second person you are actually seeing him for the first time. So from this you recognize that one of the person from those two is actually your friend, and the second person who is accompanied by your friend is someone you don't know. So here in this example you have understood that there were two processes which were applied. First one was of identification, and the second one is of recognition. In the first process you initially recognize that two approaching things were human beings. That was identification. And the second process, you recognize that one of them was your friend. Likewise, this is a simple example. If you talk about more examples from the organization's perspective again, for instance, you are working in the organization and there is an external audit team who has performed the audit of your whole organization, and they have clubbed around 80 points and they have given the points to your organization, and they are expecting a response on those 80 points. Now, now as they have conducted the audit of whole of the organization, so therefore there are going to be questions pertaining to different departments. So here in this example, out of these 80 questions which are being asked by that external audit team, external auditor team, you will try to identify that which are the questions pertaining to marketing department. Which were the out of those 80 points selected by the audit department. There are, like, for example, there are 15 points which are from the marketing department. So here you have, from those 80 audit points, you have realized that 15 points are identified as the points for marketing department. Now, once those 15 points are identified, now you will try to exactly take a more closer look to those 15 points. Now, out of these 15 points, you will again revisit those 15 points. You'll see that from those 15 points, there are 12 points which are very easy to understand. You have not only identified those points, but you have also figured out that which are the various functional areas within marketing department, uh, from which those 12 audit points were picked. But there are 3 points which you come across in the marketing department audit. And though from the wordings you can identify that those 3 points are pertaining to the marketing department, but once you review those three audit points, then you basically recognize that you see the three gaps which they have identified in those audit points are something not interpretable for you people. So 12 points you have identified and you have recognized that you see that out of the whole marketing policy, complete marketing policy, which area of the marketing team those 12 audit points are pertaining to. But the 3 points, you are not recognizing them. You have identified them as of marketing department, but you are not recognizing them, that you see from which area of marketing the audit team has picked those three audit observations. You are totally blank. Now you will take these 3 points back to the audit team and you would like to have a clarity that you see the audit team has picked those 3 points from which area within the marketing team. So with this example, we have understood, we have discussed the difference between the process of identification and recognition. So in the process of identification, in this example, we have 80 points initially. So initially those 80 audit observations. In the process of identification, it was identified that which were the which audit observation belongs to which department. And from those 80 points, you recognize that 15 points are basically belonging to the audit team, to the marketing team. And now in this process of recognition, you realize that from those 15 points, 3 points are totally not identifiable. Those 3 points you have identified, that those are pertaining to the marketing department, but you are unsure, you're not clear exactly from which functional area or from which working area of marketing those 3 points are actually picked. So here you would need to have clarity from audit team. So here you have uh, the recognition process has been failed. So you would always approach back the audit team to exactly identify, recognize that you see those 3 points are picked from where. So I hope with these two examples we have clarified the concept of identification and recognition. So again, another example can be, for example, you have, I mean, in your early school days, for example, you were in like class one, and you had you had, for example, you had 10 friends in the class. Now you people meet again after 40 years. After 40 years, you meet again. Now you will identify, firstly, that you see, okay, from this, you have been invited in the grand ceremony of that school, in which you have invited the 50 years of that particular school, and 50 batches they have actually cleared. So you would try to recognize your friends. You will identify, first of all, that in that big party there are a lot of students which are called of that particular school, and initially you will take a look at the faces of the various students who are attending that ceremony, first of all, and then you will identify that who are the classmates of yours. And after having them identified that, okay, those are the people sitting in that particular corner who are belonging to your class. Now since 40 years in fact have passed, so there is an obvious going to be difference between not between in the appearance of that whole sort of squad. So now from this identification in which this has been identified, that the I mean the 20% sitting in that corner are the students of class 1 of 40 years ago. And now after having got mingled within those sitting students, now you try to recognize that who is who actually. So now this is the process of identification and recognition, in this example, that you have been invited in a school after 40 years, and you need to recognize from your early childhood days. Now 40 years pass, and now you're trying to recognize that who is who and who is um, who's actually whom. Whether if they are from your actual class or not, there can be people you will meet and they'll tell you that they're actually from that class, but once you'll try to cross examine and you'll try to recognize, you'll get to know that, okay, the person who was telling you that he is from the same class which you were in, and you will not recall anything from that person's information which that person is actually sharing. Now you'll get to know that the person is actually probably lying to you. So this way, this process of identification and recognition takes place. So we have also shared this example of organization where the audit team was where the audit team conducted the audit and shared 80 observations, and you identified that which audit observation was belonging to which department. And after having identified that, that which organization which were the observations belonging to your department, then you were trying to recognize that, you see that which functional area those identified problems were belonging to. So this was another example which we did actually discussed. So the last topic of today's talk is regarding memory, which is simple in the sense that the definition says that it's the ability and skill of retention. You can very easily refer back to the same example which we just discussed, that is your ability and skill of retention that applies everywhere in that applies in the human recognition part. You see that, do you recognize and do you meet people, and then do you remember their names, do you remember their faces, and if you get to meet them after like so many years, and will you be able to recognize them again, will you be able to recall the name again, and will you be able to recall the incident where that meeting took place. So all this is the process of memory. Likewise, if you talk about from the same organizational perspective, and for example, the same audit example, if we try to relate that example of audit to this topic of memory, then what we'll understand is that that you will if somebody, for example, after having this audit done, and the same audit team comes again after 10 years and you're working for the same organization. So now they will try to discuss that, okay, 10, but there's a single auditor who is actually interested to find out that the 10 years before when he came, so the observations he had regarding the marketing department. So still all still those observations are prevailing within the marketing department. To figure that thing out, they might ask you that what were those 15 observations pertaining to the marketing team. So now, obviously, you'll need to refer back to that audit report. But without referring to that audit report, it would also be dependent upon your memory. That if you observe that very, very keenly and nicely at that time, so you might have very good memory, and you would not need to refer back to the audit report to pull those 15 points again from the memory and tell that to the auditor that, okay, these were the 15 points you talked about. So but if you will have weaker memory, and then you might have to refer back to the audit report, because in both of the circumstances, if you have good observation and the auditor asks you that, you see, let me know the 15 years ago the audit observations which I had, or 10 years ago the audit observations I had uh, for the same department work. And if you are able to pull those observations from the memory, then the auditor is even going to be impressed that, okay, you have great command over the work you're doing, and he'll be happy to meet you again, and he'll be very happy. He'll be his approach to audit is probably going to get a little relaxed there, because he would know that the person he's actually meeting with, that person actually very, very sincere with the job, and that is the reason why he's actually remembering all the observations which were discussed 10 years ago. So that all depends upon the memory. The good memory you have, that depends upon your attention process as well, that how attentive you were when any particular task was taking place. Were you interested in the human being? Were you paying attention to the speaker? Were you good? Did you have good observation? Only if you had good observation, only then you'll be able to retain good things in your mind, and only then you'll be able to retain things in your mind rather, and that thing once retained in the memory is always going to be help. That's just like if somebody has read a book and again the same book is being read, then the person actually loses little interest, because if the story is not that interesting. Or same way, for example, if you are in the court of law and you are a judge, and there is a case which you have uh, lately witnessed, and after 3 days there is another case which is almost of similar legal facts, with the same witnesses, with the same type of legal points to witness for you. So now you would not need to refer back to the law again to give a decree or give a decision regarding that case which you are handling right now, because you have very attentively listened to the presentation of that lawyer who has represented his client, and you have understood very masterly that, you see, the points which this lawyer has just talked about are exactly the mirror image of the points which you had discussed 3 days ago in another case. So now you would know that, you see, based on so and so law, you decided so and so, and now in this particular case, if you paid attention very, very properly, and if you have very, very good memory, then you would not be required you will not require to again go back to the relevant laws to give the decision. Rather, you will easily identify the three identified laws, that which are the pertaining laws for that particular case, and as per law, what are the remedies which are available to the client, or what are the punishments which are to be awarded to the violator. So this way the memory plays part in the whole process. So this way in the organization, if you have good memory, you'll always have a good recognition, because people with good memory will be appreciated by the auditors, will be appreciated by the bosses, and that is always going to be of great help if you have good memory. So with this, we have reached to the conclusion of this topic, in which we have talked about attentional process, organizational process and perception, identification and recognition, and memory. I hope that examples which we have discussed today were very simple, and based on the examples, it would be very easy for you to retain the points in your mind, and with the same knowledge, you can easily clear the questions in the exam if the questions are pertaining to perception topic. So with this, let's conclude today's session, and we will meet in the next session.